YouTube. I'm going to do the controversial parenting tag. This tag has been around for a long time, as most of you know. I think I started watching some of the people that I'm subscribed to do this tag maybe like a year and a half to 2 years ago, but I still see it going around sometimes. So if you're subscribed to me, do this tag if you're comfortable with it, because I love hearing other people's thoughts on these sort of issues that tend to be taboo. Not all of them, but it's just neat to see what people have to say and why they think the way that they think about these topics that are at times hard to talk about. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start. The first topic is pro-life versus pro-choice. And I definitely see both sides of this issue. I've kind of evolved a little bit on this issue. I am pro-choice because at the end of the day, I really think there's just not enough scientific proof to determine when life begins. And without having that, I don't think it's fair to put a law in place that would stop someone from choosing to end a pregnancy up until a certain point. Since I've been a young mom and I've been in this situation of not knowing how things were going to go and not having a secure relationship and all those kinds of things, abortion has been a very real option for me. And through those experiences, I just feel that it is important that people consider, a very high percentage of women who choose abortion is one of the hardest decisions they'll ever make. And that doesn't make it right. That doesn't mean that people have to be okay with it, but I think it's just important to consider that. And sometimes people who are pro-life maybe assume that it's being used as birth control, which I guess it is, but like it's being used just lightly, that kind of thing. The second point that I wanted to make on abortion, and a big reason why I'm pro-choice, is because most people who are pro-life believe that life begins at conception. And I'm certainly not here to say that that's false, because I can't prove that, I don't know that. But if you do believe that life begins at conception, it rules out some really great things like IVF, in vitro fertilization, where sperm and egg meet and conception happens, and then that embryo or fertilized egg, whatever you want to call it, is inserted, and so the embryos that they don't use are just sitting there in a petri dish, and they may or may not be used, and if they're not used, they're discarded. And to me, if you believe that life begins at conception, then at this point with where we are with IVF, I don't know how you could support that. And that's an issue, because it's an amazing thing that has helped so many parents, so many people become parents that couldn't have been otherwise. So that's a big thing. And then the second thing is the morning after pill. There again, if conception happens, I think it stops the fertilized egg or the embryo. Is it called an embryo at that point? I can't remember. Zygote, embryo? I'm not sure. Anyway, not sounding very smart here, but it stops it from being implanted, I believe. And there again, you'd have to be against that too. And so I just feel like it gets real sticky if you believe that life begins at conception. And I don't know if I think it's a heartbeat. I don't know what it is. But one line that I would definitely draw with abortion is when a baby hits the week of viability. Of course, if they can survive outside the womb, to me, that is definitely a person. But who's to say that they're not a person when they just have a heartbeat? I don't know. It's a very complex issue. I won't go on and on about it, but I'm pro-choice because there's so many unknowns. And I think, if an abortion takes place very early in the pregnancy and the woman knows that maybe they have a drug abuse problem, maybe they're in an abusive relationship, maybe they have 2 children and their birth control failed them, or they just were not being responsible and they became pregnant and they really felt like they could not take good care of that baby. Of course, we all then say, what's the best option? Adoption. And adoption, I don't think anyone would argue, really, not many people would argue that adoption is the best option, because a family who wants a child gets a baby, and a woman who is not able to parent is able to continue with their life with not having to have that responsibility put on them. But I think the issue is that the amount of people that have unwanted pregnancies who are open to adoption is pretty small. And then even if they're open to it, the amount who actually follow through with the adoption is also pretty small. And so to just count on adoption especially when a lot of people who have unwanted pregnancies are in a place where they may not be thinking about the child first, so adoption, becomes even less likely of an option. It just gets really complicated. So with all that said, I am pro-choice. Hopefully all of my answers will not be quite that long. So I just wanted to kind of explain, because that to me is a really heavy topic. All right. Number 2 is baby wearing. I can make that very short. Like most people say, baby wearing is great. It's awesome. It's good for mom. It's good for baby. It's just there's really nothing bad about it. I live in the southern part of the United States, and I don't see a whole lot of baby wearing. I have an Ergo and a Moby, and I like it. All right, number 3 is circumcision. I am against circumcision, and I say it that way because I do feel strongly about it, but I was not always against circumcision, and I don't think you're a bad parent if you circumcise your child either. I think that what led me, I'll just talk about that. What led me to not be in favor of circumcision was just doing my own research. I was really just not informed at all about circumcision. In fact, I kind of thought that every boy was circumcised. I didn't know that any boys were not circumcised, right? So when I was about 5 or 6 months pregnant and I found out I was having a boy in my first pregnancy, my sister had just had a boy or was close to having her son, and she asked me, she was like, "Are you going to circumcise him?" And I don't remember my exact response, but I do remember saying something along the lines of, "Yeah, I guess, who doesn't circumcise their baby?" So therefore, I cannot be judgmental of when other people circumcise their children, because I would have done it if someone wouldn't have encouraged me to do research about it. And all it really took was for me to read about how the benefits that there are really aren't that beneficial. It's not really proven whether or not it's better to have a circumcision performed, and also seeing the pictures of what a circumcision, what it entails. And I was always familiar with female circumcision happening overseas, and it just terrified me to think of that happening to young girls. And although the anatomy is somewhat different, to me it's kind of the same thing, male circumcision. And my son right now is my sweet little boy, right? He's this innocent, awesome little boy. But eventually he's going to be a man, and he's a sexual being just as I am, and there's nothing wrong or dirty about that. And I want him to be able to have every experience that he's biologically designed to have. And the foreskin does have quite a bit of nerve endings, and I wouldn't want to take that from him just based on tradition or religion, or that maybe some other kid will think his penis looks weird. At first, I would have circumcised for those reasons, but once I did the research, I really realized that that is not okay, and I hope that that changes in our society. But I want to make it very clear that I do not think you are a bad parent if you choose to circumcise. I think it's just one of those things that's kind of a norm in our society, and hopefully over time it won't be, because it's just not fair. They should make that decision for themselves. Number 4 is adoption. I think adoption's amazing. I've actually, as a friend, been on both sides of adoption. When I was about, I guess 14, one of my best friends became pregnant. Unfortunately, it was an awful situation, as you can imagine, because she was very, very young. And I think she delivered when she was 15 in 9th grade of high school. And she ended up giving her baby up at just 2 days old in the hospital. She picked a family and did an open adoption. And then in my adult life, I had a close friend who struggled with infertility that adopted a baby from a teen mom. So I did get to see it on both sides, and I think it's amazing. It's really just amazing. The only thing that I will say about it, as far as something to critique about it, I guess, would be, I think it's really important for parents to encourage their daughters, if they are teen mothers, to parent if they think that they have the potential. They have a good head on their shoulders, they're not abusing drugs, they're not, somehow just any 16, 17-year-old person having a baby like I did is going to have some issues and some drama and some things going on. But But if you see that that person has potential, I think it's important as a family to come around that person and encourage them to parent and help them parent, help them get on their feet. Don't just say that they should give their baby away because they're 16, if that makes sense. And that does kind of hit on a personal thing that happened to me, because I had a lot of people encourage me to look into adoption. And while I'm glad that it was an option, I did have a pretty good head on my shoulders. There were things, you know, I had a lot of growing to do, of course, being that age, but it terrifies me to think that I would have chosen adoption out of pressure, basically. So that's kind of the only thing I had to say about that that's not positive. Number 5, baby piercing. I'm not a fan. I think it's really exciting. I think Clogger, Danielle, she was saying, I can't remember the numbers at the end of your channel name, I think she was saying the same thing that happened with me when I was like 9 or so. I told my mom, or asked my mom, that I wanted to get my ears pierced, and I went. I actually went with my dad, but we went and it was a fun thing, and we went to the mall and it was an exciting experience, and that's sort of how I see it happening with my daughter, how I hope it happens. I feel like when it's a baby, it does not mean you're a bad parent. It's not like that big of a deal, but I kind of feel like it's more for the parent than for the child, and I don't love that about it. So it's not something that I would choose. Number 6, breast milk versus formula. Oh man, I've already been talking for 11 minutes. It's a long time, sorry guys. Okay, breast milk versus formula. Obviously, have I said obviously a lot? I don't know. I start repeating myself whenever I'm making videos. Breast milk is clearly best. We all know this. It is the best. Breastfeeding is best, hands down. With that said, I don't think formula is that awful. I hope I don't get too much judgment for that. I just don't think formula is really that awful. What I do think is awful is what I did when I had my first child. I kind of tried breastfeeding, but with no intention to continue. So I think like if you don't try at all, it is a personal choice, but I think it's kind of crappy, and I did that, and it was a big regret of mine. So I'm not saying it like in a mean, judgmental way, but I do think that is bad. I think you should at least try at first, you know, but I don't think formula is a big deal. I breastfeed and I formula feed, and it works very well for me. There are days that I wish I was only breastfeeding, but overall I'm glad that I have formula, and it makes my life easier. Not that everything's about being easy, but I just don't think it's that awful. But I don't like that formula is pushed so much. So yeah. Alright, number 7, spanking. I've kind of swatted my son maybe like 3 times in his life. He's 7.5. It's just not a very effective form of discipline for us, to be honest. Being consistent and taking things away from him, and just sticking to our word with him works a lot better. I think spanking kind of creates issues, but I don't think it's like the worst thing in the world either. Co-sleeping, I think co-sleeping is great. It just depends on you and the baby and what your needs are. As long as it's done in a safe manner, I think it can be really good. There are things about it that can be hard, like it kind of disrupting your sleep. I've experienced that a little bit, but I've also experienced incredible bonding with my daughter in co-sleeping. So it just depends on you and the baby, and I would say we part-time co-sleep, and I like that. Number 9, home, public, private, or charter schooling. I think homeschooling is a great option. I don't quite have the patience to be the homeschool teacher or the confidence, which is kind of funny because I want to be a teacher, but only in like one subject, not all the subjects. So I think homeschooling is really cool. My son is in public school. This is his 3rd year. He went to kindergarten and 1st grade. Now he's going to 2nd grade in public school, and we're happy with it for the most part. Private school, I like a lot of things about private school. I am somewhat considering private schooling. Although I was raised in a religious household, I am not religious, and so all the private schools are religious based, so that's kind of an issue for us. So we'll see what the future holds on that one. Charter schooling, I don't know enough about, so I don't have an opinion on that. Sorry, I'm kind of rushing. I just don't want this to be like forever long. Number 10, vaccinations. I am pro vaccinations. I think I'm just grateful that we have them, doing them on a delayed schedule, understanding what's going into your child's body. Of course, those things are really important, but not having vaccinations I think is terrifying, and there are lots of people across the globe that I think would kill for what we have. So yeah, I'm totally pro vaccination, but you have to do what works for you. Number 11, medicating children. There are kind of two parts to this. Of course, I think that you should avoid medicating if you can, especially when it gets into older children who get diagnosed with like being bipolar, ADD, ADHD. I think the most important thing, hope I don't sound like a hypocrite because I am a heavier person, I struggle with my weight, but I think that diet is a huge thing for kids that are on Ritalin and things like that. I think diet, lifestyle, their environment, that needs to be approached first, and then move on to medicine, because medicine is wonderful and it's powerful and it can be a great thing, but it can be a really awful thing for a child that doesn't need it, that's just drinking too much caffeine and eating too much sugar and playing too many video games and not getting enough attention from their parents, and then they're topping it off with giving them Ritalin. That's scary. So I think we have to be really careful and approach it as holistically as possible, and then go from there. And medicine, like I said, can be a great thing when it's really needed. Number 12, cloth versus disposable. All you cloth diapering mamas, you are amazing. I respect you. I admire you. I want to be one of you, but I'm just not. I'm just not there. I think it's great. I disposable diaper. I wish I cloth diapered because I think it's really cool and great for the environment and everything, but yeah, wow, I respect you all. 13, cry it out. I'm not a fan of crying it out. I tried it with my son, like sleep training, for a short period of time when he was maybe like 6 or 7 months old, and it was awful and it didn't work for us. It just wasn't a fit. I'm not okay with it. I think biologically we're designed, as an infant, I think you feel like you need to know that someone's there, or you're being held, or they're close. I don't think babies can be spoiled, really. Having them learn to self-soothe, I think, can be a great thing. If cry it out works for you, like you do it once and your baby sleeps from there on out, that's amazing, that's great, but it's just not for me at all. And yeah, I'm not a fan of it. Was that the last question? That was the last question. Well, I didn't mean to rush so much, but I just didn't want it to be like 20 minutes long, so I think I'm getting close to 20 minutes long. Alright, well, thank you guys so much for watching, and yeah, do this tag if you feel comfortable with it, because I really like watching them. Alright, bye guys.